There is a harsh truth. When an overly sensitive soul reaches the ripened moments of life, the world around them seems louder, yet inside, a profound silence spreads. Laughter, words, even the arguments of others no longer strike directly, but the subtle vibrations within the heart echo fiercely. The empath, after a lifetime of sheltering the pain of others, often stands at this stage like a wall covered in cracks, not because they are weak, but because their heart has opened too many times to embrace both the light and the shadow of others. Carl Jung emphasized that the human soul never truly ages, only the body wears down over time. And for sensitive souls, the shadow does not vanish with gray hair, it simply takes on new forms. If youth drew them into manipulative relationships at this point, the darkness appears through isolation, through invisible voices whispering, "For whom have you truly lived, if not for yourself?" This marks the beginning of a late yet sacred journey, when the empath realizes that silence is no longer sacrifice, but an invitation to explore the depths of their own unconscious. Within the quiet of this period, another truth emerges. Much of what they have given was an unbounded devotion, a patch of soul taken root by others without their awareness. Empaths often attach themselves to the image of others like shadows in a mirror, reflecting pain, emptiness, and weakness, while gradually fading themselves. Jung calls this the projection of the ego. What feels like saving another is, in truth, confronting the shadow within oneself, mirrored in another. As the pace of duties and responsibilities slows, this emptiness becomes unmistakable. Sitting alone in a quiet room, they suddenly see the faces of those who passed through their lives returning, not in flesh, but as lingering sensations, reproachful words, cold gazes, the fear of abandonment. These are not merely memories, they are unconscious threads still wrapped tightly around the soul. And in that moment, a question rings like a bell. If the time remaining is limited, will you dare to step out of the cycle of projection, to face the darkness head on and name it? When an empath begins confronting the shadow, they often recognize a bitter paradox. Those who once hurt them most are the very ones who revealed the map of their unconscious. Years of manipulation and exploitation by those feeding their ego on another's sacrifice are no longer just tear-stained memories. They become harsh lessons of the soul. Jung reminded us that darkness is not the enemy, but the teacher, forcing us to face the places we have never dared to tread. In the quieter chapters of life, this becomes even more evident. There is no longer room for avoidance, no time to drain one's energy for others. The truth cuts like a knife. If the inner flame is not protected, the empath risks extinguishing in the silence of their own being. Yet this is also a rare opportunity. Within solitude, a space opens for rebirth. Solitude is no longer a curse, it is a threshold. When a sensitive soul dares to step through, they realize that self-worth has never depended on being a refuge for others. It comes from confronting the shadow, embracing the pain, and slowly unraveling the invisible cords that have bound the soul for so long. The empath stands amid a vast sea of darkness, where light and shadow merge in a rhythm both familiar and strange. The shadow no longer recalls the faces that passed through their life. It becomes an invisible mass, both alien and familiar, reflecting all the parts of the soul long forgotten, tucked away in the corners of the self. Every pain, every instance of exploitation, every invisible sacrifice now emerges like a map, compelling them to confront themselves with no escape. Jung once called the shadow the soul's eternal companion, and in this moment, that statement resonates more powerfully than ever. It offers no forgiveness, no softness. It tests every fragile fragment, every mask once constructed to hide the truth within. The empath realizes no one can save them but themselves. Facing the shadow is no longer optional. It is a matter of survival, a call from the depths urging them to acknowledge every part of themselves, both light and dark, to ultimately discover a wholeness they never dared imagine. Within this intense stillness, there are no questions, no doubts, only a faint, guiding light, revealing the possibility of living truly, fully, and unshakably. There is a peculiar truth many only recognize in the later chapters of life. Silence is not what they imagined. It is not merely a time to rest, read, or enjoy leisure. It is when memories, relationships, and old wounds begin to knock on the door. Empaths, those who have spent a lifetime tending to the emotions and needs of others, often realize that the emptiness within surpasses even the quiet of an empty home. For decades, they have been accustomed to being a support, always listening, always yielding, always carrying the pain of others as if it were their natural responsibility. But when no one needs that role anymore, a question arises: what about me? Who have I truly lived for? That is the voice of the shadow within, the part of the soul left behind throughout a busy life spent for others. This is not a reproach, but an invitation. Jung emphasized that the shadow contains the missing pieces of ourselves. In the later stages of life, confronting the shadow is no longer a distant challenge. It is a genuine opportunity, a chance to reflect and find one's own worth, not in anyone else's eyes, but in the quiet peace of one's inner self. There comes a special moment in the journey of life, when the workday ends, children grow up, and responsibilities ease. Silence begins to spread across the days. For many empaths, this quiet is not mere rest. It is like a giant mirror reflecting all the years gone by. Suddenly, they realize they have spent most of their lives listening, carrying, and protecting others, but rarely pausing to ask, what about myself? Throughout a long journey, sensitive people often become a pillar for others. They are used to staying silent to maintain peace, to absorb pain in place of others, to sacrifice without demanding return. But when no one relies on them daily, a strange emptiness appears. This void is not only loneliness, but a reminder that a part of the soul has been forgotten for far too long. Jung called this forgotten part the shadow, not an enemy, but a missing half. And here lies a precious opportunity. Instead of continuing to live in the memories of others, this is the time to reclaim the lost piece, to see that they still hold value, even when no longer serving as anyone's support. What unsettles many sensitive souls the most is not the stillness around them, but the noise within their memories. Faces that have passed, reproachful words, feelings of abandonment and exploitation, all return like a slow-motion film. Many are surprised. Why, after all these years, does it still sting? In truth, these are not mere memories, but fragments of emotions that were never fully acknowledged or released. Jung once said that what we reject in the unconscious returns in the form of fate. For empaths, this is especially evident. In youth, they often unconsciously gravitate toward unbalanced relationships, where they give far more than they receive, where they are manipulated through silence or guilt. And when life slows down, these experiences resurface, not to hurt them further, but to remind them that something within remains unresolved. If met with courage, this moment is an opportunity for transformation. Instead of blaming the past or continuing the role of savior, the empath can begin a new journey, to regard old wounds as part of their truth and gradually lay them down. Only by releasing these burdens can they touch the peace that had previously eluded them. This peace does not arrive in a sudden burst. It flows like an underground stream, slowly seeping into every crevice of the soul. Empaths, accustomed to directing their attention outward, gradually learn to turn inward. Instead of asking, who needs me? The question becomes, what do I truly need to live fully? This is the first step toward inner freedom. Jung calls this process individuation, not becoming someone else, but becoming a more complete version of oneself. It demands rare courage, facing the shadow that holds suppressed anger, unacknowledged desires, and fatigue hidden beneath a strong exterior. Yet, rather than resisting, the empath learns to sit with these emotions, like reuniting with an old friend long avoided. The miracle is that the shadow is not as frightening as imagined. It is the forgotten part of the soul, waiting to be heard. When embraced, it no longer weighs them down. It becomes a source of clarity, balance, and an unprecedented inner energy. From this clarity emerges an essential truth. Love and kindness are no longer unconditional sacrifice, but a choice with limits. Empaths, once accustomed to giving until depletion, as if their value depended on easing others' pain, now recognize a fresh truth. Loving is not turning oneself into an empty vessel to be drained endlessly, but keeping the flame in the heart alive, bright enough to warm, but not to be extinguished. This is the maturity Jung spoke of, the ability to discern genuine compassion from complicity in another's shadow. When a sensitive soul sets boundaries, they do not become selfish. They become more luminous. They learn to say no without guilt, to remain silent without abandoning anyone, to protect their inner peace as an irreplaceable treasure. Then something remarkable happens. Freed from unjust relationships, they begin to hear their own inner call more clearly. This call is not always grand. Sometimes it is the joy of rising early to watch the sunrise, or the quiet contentment of sitting alone on a still afternoon. Yet these simple moments reveal a profound truth. They have never lost their worth. They are only now truly living it. Once an empath begins living in alignment with their true value, they start to see the world through a different lens. The things that once drained them, cold silences, baseless criticism, no longer carry the same weight. They understand now. The reactions of others are often mirrors reflecting their own shadow, not definitions of who they are. Realizing this is like removing a long-standing shackle, the shackle of seeking validation from outside. Jung once said, "Do not cling to what others think of you. Seek what your soul truly longs for." In the stillness of this stage of life, empaths finally have space to listen to that longing. Some find joy in creativity, others in small but genuine connections, and some simply in a garden or a row of trees, feeling life quietly smile back at them. Most importantly, they learn that solitude is no longer a pit, but fertile ground. In separation, a new inner strength arises, not dependent on being needed, but on feeling whole while simply sitting, breathing, and existing. As this inner strength grows, a subtle transformation occurs. The empath no longer sees the shadow as a threat, but as a natural part of life. They understand that light and dark always coexist, just as joy and sorrow, gain and loss, beginnings and endings. This balance is no longer theoretical. It becomes a living, daily experience. In these peaceful years, the greatest lesson is not avoiding pain, but the ability to sit with it without fear. Suffering is no longer an enemy, but a strict teacher, showing that the soul can endure more than imagined and can also rise stronger than ever. This is the essence of what Jung called shadow work, not banishing or denying, but transforming what once confined them into guiding strength. Within this acceptance, a new freedom emerges. The empath, who once believed life existed solely for others, now recognizes the value of living for themselves. They need no noise, no validation, no witness. They exist like a clear stream, quietly flowing, yet unshakable. From this quiet, a new quality arises. Compassion is no longer weakness, but solid strength. The empath, no longer trapped in the cycle of healing everyone else, understands that the deepest compassion is for oneself. When the heart is protected, They can give love purely, without fear, without expectation. This marks a pivotal turning point. Blind sacrifice gradually transforms into conscious love. One once easily manipulated through guilt can now smile and say no without trembling. One once fearful of abandonment now finds fullness in their own stillness. They realize nothing is more sacred than preserving one's identity without letting anyone define or erase it. Jung taught that only by embracing both the light and shadow within can a person become whole. At this stage, the empath begins to feel that wholeness, not because they are perfect, but because they no longer deny any part of their soul. And that is the greatest gift, an inner freedom that no power, no human can ever take away. Many people think the later stages of life are merely about waiting, about slowing down. But for those souls who know how to turn inward, this is the most radiant period. After countless trials, they have enough experience to understand that happiness does not lie in pleasing others, but in living authentically according to one's own nature. The tears, the times they were used, the heavy memories, no longer weigh them down, but stand as proof of their resilience and capacity for rebirth. In this way, the process of individuation Jung spoke of is no longer an abstract concept, but a tangible experience. A journey in which a person, even after being broken, can gather the shattered pieces and form a new self, more beautiful, clearer, and at peace. As this journey reaches its culmination, a profound stillness envelops them, not the silence of emptiness, but the quiet of a garden in bloom after many storms. The empath realizes that everything which once exhausted them, everything that caused pain, ultimately led them here, learning to be themselves, no longer defined by anyone else. This is the wisdom Carl Jung wished to convey. We cannot escape the shadow, but we can step into it to discover our own light. For sensitive souls, this is no longer theory, but a living truth. In youth, they thought their value lay in making others happy. Now they understand that true value lies in not betraying themselves. Thus, solitude is no longer a sentence, but a doorway. Sensitivity is no longer a burden, but a gift. The shadow is no longer a chasm, but a source of strength. After a lifetime navigating darkness, the empath finally reaches the inner, steady light, one that depends on no one and cannot be extinguished by any hand. This is the greatest freedom a soul can attain, and the most precious spiritual gift of this stage of life. Every quiet moment becomes an opportunity to meet oneself. Subscribe to the channel to journey alongside these profound reflections where you can discover your truest strength.